The flashing red and blue lights cut through the fog like veins of panic. Detective Rowan Mace's voice crackled through the radio. GPS says he stopped here. The night air reeked of damp soil and gasoline. Claire Hensley stood at the edge of the trees, her hands trembling as she watched officers vanish into the dark. She kept saying the same thing, softly, desperately. There's nothing here. That place doesn't exist. But when Macy's flashlight swept across the brush, the beam caught a sign half buried in the mud. A rusted plank. Letters faint, but clear enough to read. Hensley Farm. Mace turned toward Claire, his jaw tightening. She took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief, eyes wide with dread. The GPS hadn't lied. Something else had. Would you still trust your memory if the evidence said you were lying? They followed the coordinates deeper into the woods, tires crunching on gravel long forgotten. Mace kept the cruiser headlights on high beam, slicing through the fog like a knife. Claire sat in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the GPS screen. I told you. That land was flooded years ago, she muttered. But the GPS marker blinked steadily, right over dry earth. Mace didn't respond. He was listening, but not to her words. To the silence between them. The kind that only follows lies. Ahead, a shape began to form through the haze. Wooden beams, a roof sagging under age. The GPS ping stopped. They had arrived. The farmhouse loomed like a bruise against the gray horizon. Boards warped, windows broken, but there was something about it that felt recent, like it hadn't been abandoned long. Mace killed the engine. Claire's breath quickened. You can't go in there, she said, gripping the seat. Reed stepped out first, boots sinking in mud. Why not? Mace asked. Claire's eyes darted from the house to the woods. Because it's not there, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word, as if she wasn't sure whether she was warning them or herself. Mason Reed stepped through the threshold. Dust exploded in the beam of their lights. The air felt wrong. Too still, too cold. A staircase leaned against the far wall. Each step cracked. Reed's radio hissed faint static. In the corner, a chair sat overturned beside a dark stain on the floor. Mace crouched, touching it with gloved fingers. Still damp. He looked back at the doorway, where Claire stood outside, frozen. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Whatever she was afraid of, it was already inside. They found the first trace of Mark near the back wall, a broken phone, half buried in dust. Mace picked it up, the screen flickering to life for just a moment before dying again. The wallpaper image stayed in his mind. Claire and Mark smiling, standing in front of this very house. He turned toward her slowly. You've been here before, he said quietly. Her eyes widened, but she didn't answer. Outside, thunder rumbled across the valley like a warning to hear. The power flickered once and died, though no one had turned it on. Reed jumped, flashlight shaking. There's electricity, she muttered. Mace said nothing. He followed a faint buzzing sound toward the kitchen. The walls were lined with old wallpaper curling at the edges. The smell of mildew thick in the air. On the counter sat a set of muddy keys and a wet wallet. Mark's license visible through its cracked plastic. Claire stood frozen in the doorway, color draining from her face. She whispered his name so softly it barely broke the silence. Then came a sound from beneath the floorboards. Slow. Hollow. Something moving. They pried open the floorboards one by one. Beneath them lay a crawl space packed with damp earth and old debris. Mace reached down, brushing aside cobwebs, and found something wrapped in plastic. A man's shirt, stiff with dried mud. That's Mark's, Claire whispered, her voice breaking. Reed crouched beside Mace, both exchanging uneasy glances. The GPS beeped again from his pocket. Same location. Same coordinates. The signal hadn't moved at all. He's here, Mace said quietly. Claire backed away as though the air itself had turned against her. Outside, the wind picked up, slamming the loose shutters against the walls like heartbeat echoes. Claire stumbled out into the cold, gasping for air. "You don't understand," she cried. He said he'd never come back here. Mace followed, voice firm. Then why did he? The wind howled through the trees. For a moment it sounded like a voice whispering her name. Claire turned toward the woods. Through the fog, a faint figure stood between the trees, still as stone. The beam of Mace's flashlight cut through the mist and found nothing there. Back inside, Reed was calling dispatch, her voice steady but strained. "No response," she said, frowning. Static hissed through the radio like breathing. Then a voice, "Low, man. Distant. Help me. The three froze." Mace grabbed the radio, speaking sharply. "Identify yourself." Nothing. Just static. Claire pressed a hand over her mouth, trembling. "That's his voice," she whispered. Mace stared at her. Mark, silence. Then, faintly, through the static again. Underneath, the radio cut off. All at once, every light in the room flickered on. They lifted the last of the floorboards where the radio had pointed. Beneath it, the dirt sank several inches lower, like a grave that had been filled, then disturbed. Mace knelt, brushing soil aside with his glove. A faint outline of a face began to appear. Mud caked into its features. Claire screamed before she could stop herself. Mace looked up at her. Realization dawning. "Didn't go missing," he said quietly. "You buried him here." Claire shook her head violently, tears spilling down her face. "No," she gasped. "Not," she gasped. "That's not him." Her voice trembled, almost pleading. "He's still out there. I saw him last night." Rain poured through holes in the farmhouse roof. As officers marked the site, Mace stood motionless, staring at the disturbed soil. Reed had called for backup, but the signal kept dropping. Claire sat on the floor, shaking, arms wrapped around her knees. "You have to believe me," she said quietly. "He was alive last night." Mace's expression hardened. "Where?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Then faintly the GPS in his pocket beeped again. Once, twice, 3 times, before the display changed. New coordinates, just a mile north of the house. Mace's eyes narrowed. "Looks like your husband's still moving," he said. The 3 followed the new signal along a narrow path winding behind the farmhouse. The forest felt wrong. Trees too close. Air too thick. Sounds too faint. Claire stumbled as mud sucked at her shoes. "It's leading us back," she muttered. "To where it happened." Reed glanced at her. Where what happened? But Claire didn't answer. The GPS ping grew faster. Mace raised his flashlight and stopped. Ahead, in the clearing, sat a silver car coated in mud. The license plate glinted under the beam. It was Mark's. The driver's seat was empty, but the door hung open as if someone had just stepped out. Inside, the interior was drenched, dashboard lights flickering weakly. Mace leaned in, flashlight beam catching a faint smear of blood on the steering wheel. Reed searched the back seat and froze. "Detective," she whispered. A phone lay on the seat, Mark's again, but this one had no mud, no cracks, no decay. It was still on. Screen glowing with a recent text message. Mace read it aloud. "I found the place." She lied. Claire began to shake uncontrollably, whispering, "He sent that to me. That night. Before he disappeared." Her voice cracked as she looked around the clearing. "He said the house didn't look the same anymore." Mace studied her. "You said the house didn't exist." Claire's face twisted. "Because it didn't. Not like this." The wind rose, hissing through the trees like whispers. For a moment, Mace thought he heard footsteps behind them. He turned quickly. Nothing there. But when he turned back, Claire was gone. They found her minutes later, standing by an old well behind the trees. Her eyes were vacant, her hands covered in dirt. He wanted me to bury it, she murmured. Said it would stop the noise. Mace approached slowly. Bury what, Claire? Her gaze lifted, hollow and tired. The proof? She stepped aside, revealing a mound of earth beside the well. Reed knelt, brushing away the soil, and froze. A box, metal, dented, half-rusted, stamped with the same coordinates as the GPS. Mace leaned closer, dread in his eyes. Whatever was inside, it wasn't meant to be found. Mace's gloves creaked as he lifted the box from the dirt. It was heavier than it looked. The metal groaned when he set it down on the well's edge. Reed moved closer, flashlight trembling slightly. You sure about this? She asked. Mace nodded, eyes fixed. We came this far. Claire stood motionless, soaked, staring as if she already knew what was inside. When the latch finally snapped open, the smell of rot and earth filled the air. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. All of Claire and Mark, every image taken in the same place. This farmhouse. But in the most recent one, Mark stood alone. Reed lifted one of the photographs, her breath catching. These look recent, she said. Mace frowned. That's impossible. Claire's voice was distant, shaking. He used to come here when he was angry, said the walls remembered him. She looked around the clearing, eyes darting like she was expecting the trees to whisper back. Mace studied the photos. Mark alone in front of the house, smiling faintly, but something was wrong with his eyes. They were looking at the camera. They were looking past it, at whoever was behind it. They decided to return inside before the storm worsened. As they entered, lightning illuminated the farmhouse's walls, each flash revealing something new. The photographs were taped everywhere, hundreds of them. Mark's face repeated again and again, each slightly different, as if captured seconds apart in the same pose. Reed spun in disbelief. This wasn't here before, she whispered. Claire backed against the door, shaking her head violently. No, he said. He burned them. Mace turned, his voice low and grim. Claire, when was the last time you were here? Thunder rolled overhead as Mace noticed a set of muddy footprints leading up the staircase. No one went upstairs. No one went upstairs, Reed said. Massey's light followed the trail. Someone did. The boards groaned with each step. Claire's voice rose from below, breaking. Don't go up there. Please. But Mace ignored her. Each creak echoed like a heartbeat until he reached the landing. A single door stood at the end of the hall, slightly open. Inside, something moved, slow, deliberate. He raised his gun and pushed it open. The room was small, just an attic space with one window and the smell of wet rot. Lightning flared again, revealing dozens of Polaroids scattered across the floor. Each one showed the same moment from a different angle. A woman standing over a man's body with a shovel. Claire's face. Mace lowered his weapon slowly, eyes widening. You buried him yourself, he whispered. Claire's voice drifted from the doorway behind him, calm now, almost detached. I told you he wasn't dead, she said. He just never stopped following me. Lightning flared again, bleaching the attic in white. Reed stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold. Detective, we need to go, she said, voice trembling. Mace didn't move. His flashlight beam stayed on the photographs, unable to look away. Each image showed Claire's face frozen mid-scream, yet her mouth never looked open. It was as if the photos had captured her just before she spoke. Claire stepped closer. Barefoot now, mud streaking her ankles. He told me to keep them, she whispered. He said if I stopped, he'd forget who I was. Mace's throat tightened. Who did? She met his gaze. Mark. They descended the stairs in silence, every creak of the board sounding alive. Reed gripped the railing, whispering prayers under her breath. Claire followed slowly, murmuring to someone who wasn't there. You can stop hiding now, she said softly. Mace glanced back, heart pounding. Who's she talking to? he muttered. The flashlight flickered, and in that half-second of darkness, something shifted behind Claire. A faint silhouette. Male. Standing on the landing, head tilted just enough to notice them before fading with the next blink of light. Reed gasped. "There was someone there," she whispered. Mace didn't answer. The storm broke into chaos outside, rain hammering the roof. Reed stepped into the living room, calling dispatch again. Nothing but static. No signal, she said. Mace scanned the walls, noticing something new. Wet footprints, larger than Claire's, trailing from the back door toward the fireplace. "He's been here," Claire whispered, her eyes locked on the soot-stained hearth. "He always comes back here first." Mace knelt, brushing aside ashes. Beneath them, metal glinted. A key. He lifted it, and for an instant the static on Reed's radio turned clear. A man's voice said, "Don't open it!" They found the door in the basement, a steel hatch half buried under rotted planks. "This isn't on the blueprint," Reed said. The key fit perfectly. Mace hesitated before turning it. "If he's down here," he muttered, "we'll know." The hatch opened with a grinding scream, cold air rushing up from below. Claire's voice cracked as she whispered, "Don't make him angry." Mace shone the flashlight downward. Stairs carved into stone led into total darkness. From below came the faint echo of breathing. Wet, slow, and close. The basement stretched deeper than it should have. Mace's light swept over damp brick walls lined with scratches. "Something lived down here," he muttered. Reed followed close, her breath loud in the silence. They reached a concrete slab in the center, engraved with the same coordinates from the GPS. Claire's footsteps echoed behind them, soft and uneven. "She told me to leave him here," she said faintly. But he didn't want to be alone. Suddenly, Reed's light caught movement. A shadow crawling across the wall without a source. Claire's whisper filled the room. "He's awake." The basement smelled of iron and earth. Macy's light flickered, slicing through thick dust. Reed swept her beam across the slab. Something moved beneath the stone. Slow and deliberate, like something breathing under glass. "Detective," she whispered. "The ground's shifting." Mace crouched, pressing a hand against the concrete. It was warm. Claire stood near the stairs, face blank, whispering, "He never liked the dark." Mace looked up. "Claire, what is this place?" She smiled faintly, almost fondly. "His promise," she said. Then the slab cracked with a sound like bone splitting. A sound rose from below the slab. Wet, gasping, like lungs pulling air for the first time. Reed stumbled backward, nearly dropping her flashlight. "We need to get out," she shouted. But Claire only tilted her head. "He's almost here." Mace reached for her arm, but her skin felt cold, stiff. The crack in the stone widened, splitting down the middle. From the gap seeped black water, thick and glistening. Mace yanked Reed toward the stairs, but Claire didn't move. "He's been waiting for you," she said softly, and smiled like she just told him a secret. They reached the top of the stairs, but the door was gone. Just a wall of rotting wood where it used to be. Reed slammed her fists against it, screaming. Mace's flashlight flickered again, catching flashes of movement behind them. Footsteps echoed on the stone stairs below, slow and heavy. Claire began humming, soft, tuneless. A lullaby dissolving into sobs. "He never forgets the ones who dig," she whispered. The air turned colder, heavy with the smell of wet soil. Mace turned, weapon raised. "Show yourself!" he yelled, and from the darkness someone answered. "You already did." The lights died completely. Only the faint glow of the cracked slab below lit the chamber in pulses, like a heartbeat. Each flash revealed Mark a little closer. Reed grabbed Mace's arm. "He's not real," she said, but her voice shook with disbelief. Macy's heart pounded. The figure was walking toward them now, water dripping from his clothes, head tilted unnaturally. Claire stood, tears streaming, whispering, "I told you he'd come back." Mace aimed his gun, hands trembling. "Stay where you are." The figure stopped, then smiled. "You never buried me deep enough," it said, in Mace's voice. The flashlight dropped, crashing against the wet floor. The chamber filled with the sound of gurgling breaths and splashing water. Mace tried to drag Reed up the stairs, but the steps seemed endless, stretching upward like a tunnel that never reached the surface. Claire's scream tore through the dark, sudden and sharp, then cut off. Reed looked back, whispering, "Where is she?" But Mace already knew. The glow from the slab brightened, flooding the room. There, standing beside Mark, was Claire, smiling, holding his hand. The slab sealed itself with a soft, final crack. And the GPS in Mace's pocket began to beep again. Dawn rose pale and heavy, the storm's memory lingering in the fog that clung to the trees. A line of patrol cars waited along the old gravel road, their engines humming softly. The farmhouse stood silent, windows empty, roof sagging under the weight of dew. Detective Rowan Macy's cruiser sat at the edge of the property, headlights still glowing faintly through the mist. No movement, no sound, only the steady rhythm of a GPS signal beeping inside the car. A heartbeat made of static and coordinates. Deputy Reed could barely remember leaving the house. Every sound felt distant. The low murmur of officers, the buzz of the radios. She kept glancing toward the tree line, as if something there was quietly watching. "You're safe now," a medic said. But the words didn't settle. She whispered, "They're still down there." Though no one responded. When she looked back toward the farmhouse, the curtains inside seemed to move. A soft ripple, like a sigh. Yet the windows were all broken, and the wind was still. Later that day, technicians explored the site. The basement had collapsed overnight, sealed with hard-packed soil as if years had passed in a single night. No footprints, no sign of entry, just smooth, untouched ground. One investigator brushed his glove along the floorboards upstairs and found a single photograph taped there. It showed 3 people standing in front of the farmhouse: Mace, Reed, and Claire, all smiling faintly, as if posing. But none of them remembered the photo being taken. Weeks passed. The case was closed without explanation. Unresolved disappearance. Reed transferred to another precinct, though sometimes she'd still wake at 2:17 a.m., hearing faint static from her nightstand. She'd glance at her phone, but the screen would stay dark. When she drove at night, her GPS occasionally blinked on by itself, rerouting her toward coordinates she didn't recognize. The same road, the same voice, always whispering the same words. Turn back. She never did. Months later, a maintenance worker found Macy's cruiser still stored in evidence lockup. The battery was dead, but the GPS light pulsed weakly. One last flicker. He turned the key, and the screen lit up with a single destination: the old farmhouse coordinates. Then the voice spoke, calm and familiar. Recalculating route, the worker frowned. "Where to?" he muttered. The GPS paused, then answered, "Home." The screen faded to black, and somewhere far away, through static and silence, a faint echo replied, one that sounded almost human.